Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sat means truth, logos means study or science. Sattology means the science of truth or study of truth. Truth, but only truth. And our goal is mythology is, on the other hand, means a science of fake, lie, or imagination. Myth is a Sanskrit word which is a root word for many other words which connotes lying. Mithya. People say mithya, but the root word is myth. Many other words come. Mithachar, mithobipetya, mithyachar. Mithya word also comes from the root word myth. So the word mythology was coined especially for the native cultures of the world who do not have not yet accepted Abrahamic faith like Christianity, Islam, or Judaism. So anything they do, their ancient history is all mythology. You know what the biggest problem with this word mythology is? People who say others is mythology, they're actually saying if everyone else is mythology, they are also mythology. But the propaganda world goes on and on and on. And it is also an irony that most of the Western Abrahamic cultures don't call their own history as mythology. So we definitely call their history as mythology, but we call Ramayana and Mahabharata Veda as Sattology. Truth. It's a science of truth. The single biggest reason we say it is experiential. You can experience it and you can prove it through archaeology and astronomy and other factors. Shabda Praman, the most well documented literatures of the planet are Vedic literatures, very well documented. If people cannot understand them, that's their problem, not ours. I have a very, very special guest, a researcher, a very well known face in the chronology and other aspects in the Indian education system. And so without delay, let us welcome Shri Vedveer Arya.
Namaste Aditya ji.
Namaste. You know, Apne, you have done it for so many years now, all this work, so many years now. You know how many
Yes.
years you have been researching now almost?
Yeah, almost I can say I was researching since almost 20 to 22 years. But I got breakthrough because in the chronology, what happens, you have to find out a one. There is an error, you have to establish it.
Right.
Since we are talking about error in the chronology, so getting a break, so how that error? Because traditional chronology is something and what is being taught is different. So that I got it at least 7 years back.
Yeah.
Then I started writing down the everything.
And there are a lot of propagandists also who, because they are from Oxford and Cambridge, doesn't see these Western university names don't impress me at all, to be frank with you. You know, I know how to get into them. It's easy. No, just because they are Oxford and whatever you can speak. You know, I was reading the resume of one of the major mythologists and propagandists, and everywhere she has written Oxford this, Cambridge this, that. Those universities are going to give you a certificate because you're lying through your teeth. This is what they do. They have no basis for research. So sometimes nowadays, because of social media and everything else, the research domain has and the academic institutions, especially in the West, are so backward. So now the domain of research has moved outside the universities because universities have become the propaganda playhouse. What do you have to say on that?
Yes, yes. In the universities, what is happening? It's only you have to the line of the whatever has been established, so-called truth. They think that they have already established the truth. That's why they say no, the post-truth era. I don't know what that means. But everybody, universities and academies, it's only peer-reviewed subjects. It means you have to teach or write or research the way you have been taught. Then you are just grooming some parrots. You are not grooming some researchers.
Or donkeys?
So it's only what happens, only the others who can only challenge that. So the outsider. Even in a government setup or any other thing, what happens, you have to follow your seniors. So what happens, by the time you become senior, you follow the same tradition so that the same stupidity continues.
So, aren't they very casteist now? This exactly meaning of casteism, because now
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
caste
it's
means a
true.
class. So now they
Huh.
say my peer is upper caste.
Yes, yes, yes.
and rest everyone is lower caste,
Yes.
and
Yeah, if you are following the whatever the established narrative or established whatever the theories, then you are at par with those so-called very eminent scholars.
yeah,
If you are writing something against to the established narrative or anything, then you are not. You are just mediocre, or your research has no worth.
no, the Western academic institutions are so foolish. Like, if I have 10 peers of mine who have no idea about anything, how can they pass a judgment on somebody else? Because they are not trying to learn anything. So it's
Yes,
like a five donkeys coming together. They're going to make just a sound of a donkey sound. They're not going to do anything else. So,
yes,
and unfortunately, the Indian universities, who naturally have an upper hand due to the Vedic culture, they are falling into that trap of recognition. They want to get recognitions from the West, and so what
yes,
is happening is they are ignoring their own scriptures and their own research. And
yes,
all of them, including prominent institutions like IITs, IIMs, or whatever India has, are actually victim of this propaganda. Don't you agree there?
yes. Yeah, yeah. You don't need any recognition for the truth, because truth is actually has to be
Self-evident.
discovered. Once it's discovered and revealed, then you don't need somebody has to certify it.
Yes.
There are no. It is like it is a self-revelation. You have to. Everyone has to follow the a methodology to find out the truth. Once you find out the truth, then you teach the society and your generations that this is the truth. There may be some more research has to be done, no issue. But a truth need not to be certified by somebody. So I don't think the Western academia has any kind of a some kind of a authority, or somebody has given this authority to certify the truth, or a research is whether it is to be accepted or not. The acceptance will be decided by the all students and the academia in that particular field. So this West must get out of this kind of a certification process. Neither the Indian should expect for any certification from the West. It's only truth we need to, or actually our research should be based on very perfect methodology, and you must present what are the facts you have found in your research.
Yeah, my suggestion to the Indian Education Ministry is, the day you de-recognize Oxford and Cambridge degrees in India, everybody will fall in line. That's only one thing you have to do. De-recognize Harvard, Yale, Stanford, uh, or Cambridge. No, all these. And today's
No,
topic.
the biggest problem is what is happening is even so-called educated lot, there are very few who are original thinkers. They're just either downloading nowadays. The very easy to download from various websites, and then it's either your knowledge is the downloaded knowledge, or borrowed knowledge, or followed knowledge. It's not the knowledge you have created in yourself.
Or
So
forwarded
that
knowledge.
needs the thinkers. So we have to create thinkers, not the followers. The
That's
universities are just creating followers. So they
or
think that somebody who is simply following what has been established, then he is the only
is
a
a good
certified
student.
scholar.
Yeah.
Certified scholars. So these certified scholars are actually blocking the truth, or I can say blocking the progress of the human society. Actually, the Europe led into dark ages by this kind of a mentality only, and
The
that has been
certified
brought by the
scholars
Christianity. They don't want to be challenged.
certified scholars are like the blue tick of social media.
Ah, yes.
As
No, if you
important.
see why such a vibrant research in the Greece and other things, they were very almost well advanced in Babylonia and as well as the Greek and other. Why suddenly the Europe landed in a dark ages? Why there was no progress? Why? Due to this kind of a peer reviewing and the guarding your fox. So that happened. Actually, Christianity did this job. Due to that, original thinking lost, and everybody was following what church is saying. So then finally, when the Florentine merchants started challenging the Christianity, the Renaissance has been started. So I think we have to start another Renaissance. probably.
No, actually, the Dark Age started because of the church. That's the main reason.
Yeah,
Because they
yes,
killed all the scientists, anyone who questioned
yeah.
them.
Not only that, they killed every other religions also, so that
That's right.
no open, actually no diversity exists.
Yes.
Everybody has to think, need not think. You simply read Bible and follow that. That's all. The same thing. The Muslims see even worse, especially the Islam traditions. So that happened. So we have to tell the everyone that there is a way. You have to, though we have a certain traditions, religions, and religious texts, or even our academic textbooks also become like a religious text. You can't challenge any theory which has been established. So we are slowly moving to be that kind of a fundamentalist in the academia.
So today we are talking about chronology of the Shaka era. And in the last videos, we have already covered a lot of chronology. And particularly the last video, the missing link we resolved of the history. And so whenever you're ready, we can start now with Virji.
Yes. Actually, I have spoken about the chronological error in the context of Indian history. Like Buddha has to be dated at least 1380 years before. I'll
Correct.
just show you what actually the real chronological problem,
Mhm.
because this has to be resolved, because without that you can't even. I'll just give the chronological problem in Indian history. So this is the tradition. Our tradition is Mahabharata war, somewhere in the 32nd century. I have shown you this slide many times, but I am just wanted to first, at the outset, I want to establish the what actually the real chronological problem. This is actually 1380. So we have spoken, actually discussed about the dating of Buddha, because Buddha has to be dated in the 19th century BC. He attained Nirvana 1864 BCE. And Adi Shankaracharya, he was born in the 6th century BC. This is our chronological history. Actually, this history was existed before arrival of the colonial rulers. But when the colonial rulers arrived, they started questioning the sheet anchors of the traditional chronology. So the finally we could not resolve certain chronological problems. Finally, they arrived our chronology, like Buddha somewhere in the 6th century to 5th century BC. Then Maurya around 1324 to third and fourth, almost fourth and third century BC. Due to this dating, Adi Shankaracharya's date also has also been shifted to 8th century AD. And now we have almost proven that Vikramaditya was a mythical king and Kalidasa, Varahamira can never be contemporaries. So this is how. So the basic problem is the chronological error of 660 years due to mixing up of two different Shaka eras. Actually, in Indian tradition, one early Shaka era existed, one later Shaka era. But over a period, since we used to refer to the both epochs as Shaka, the generally people have forgotten the old Shaka, because old Shaka epoch was just counting eras. It was not part of your Panchanga or your calendrical system. But the second Shaka era was actually established by the Indian astronomers. Therefore, Indian society used to every day follow that Shaka calendar. So that's why the astronomical Shaka era, later Shaka era, became more popular in India, and gradually we have forgotten somewhere 10th, 11th, 12th century, the epoch of ancient Shaka era. So due to that, what happened? The chronological history has been brought forward by 660 year, because there was a gap of 660 year between early epoch of Shaka era and later epoch of Shaka era. How this mixing up of two different epochs into one, let us explore that one. This is what I'm going to talk about. The old Shaka era was actually established by a Shaka king called Chashtana, and that epoch commenced in 583 BCE. But later, in 78 AD, Indian astronomers actually fixed one epoch for the better and accurate astronomical calculation, and rather for the calendrical calculations. So they selected this epoch very meticulously, and they started writing all astronomical text using this. And even today, we use 78 AD for the various astronomical calculation in our calendar. The difference between these two epochs is 660 or 661 years. Now, what happened during the colonial era? This Shaka epoch, actually, even prior to Britishers' arrival, we have actually forgotten the epoch of 583 BC. Then what happened? Wherever Shaka has been referred, we started using the 78 AD. Now the problem is Varahamihira, he refers to Shaka Era, and in his Panchasiddhantika, he referred to 427 Shaka Era. So naturally, he has to be dated after 78 AD. And Kalidasa, he refers to Shaka 445 year. Now 445 year has to be dated after 78 AD. Now the colonial rulers have questioned, you say, means the Indian historians or Indian scholars, the colonial rulers question, if Varahamira Kalidasa were in the court of Vikramaditya who lived in the 1st century BC, how they are referring to 445 or 427 7 Shaka that can only be dated in somewhere 500 AD. So you can't date them in 1st century BC. So we could not answer. Actually, we did not had any answer to this question because we have already forgotten the epoch of ancient Shaka. I am claiming the existence of ancient Shaka epoch of 583 BC based on the epigraphic evidence, and epigraphy is the most authentic part of the archaeological evidence, because in an archaeology you will find certain inscriptions, certain copper plates, as well as certain artifacts. But artifacts and others, some can be dated. If it is an organic material, then you can date using the carbon dating methodology. But copper plates are actually the original text, cannot be rewritten, and these texts have a certain dates. So we can get an absolute dating using the epigraphic evidence, where that is not possible with the archaeological evidence. That's why epigraphy is the most authentic source for establishing the chronology. So let us explore it. There is a one Kurtakoti copper plate. This copper plate was found in Badami area, and this copper plate refers to a total solar eclipse that occurred on Vaishakha Jyeshtha Madhyama Amavasya, means on the day of new moon of Vaishakha month. The Vaishakha is equal to May in Gregorian calendar. Now, what I did, because this copper plate refers to Shaka 530 Shaka. So what I did, I selected a period of 3000 period from 1500 BC to 1500 AD. During this period of 3000 years, let us take the latitude of the northern Karnataka, where the Badami city existed. Then you find out how many total solar eclipses occurred during that period. So when I have just calculated the occurrences of solar eclipses during the 3000 period, there are hardly only 10 solar eclipses occurred during that period, total solar eclipses in that particular longitude latitude area. So that is, if you see this, that I have listed the 10 total solar eclipses, out of which only one solar eclipse that occurred on 9th May 53 BCE, it not only matches all the verifiable details given in the copper plates, but also this is the only one solar eclipse that occurred in Vaishakha Masa, in Vaishakha month. Because none of the other solar eclipses took place in the month of May. It is the only one solar eclipse, that is the 9th May 53 BC. Since it perfectly matches, because that solar eclipse, even the time when the solar eclipse ended has also been mentioned as a Madhyana Kala, means just around the noon. Noon is around 12 o'clock. So this total solar eclipse actually commenced around 9 hours, 4 minutes in the morning. Then it ended around 11:45 or 11:50, between that time, so just 5-10 minutes before the noon. This is the reason this solar eclipse exactly mentioned the date, time of the this solar eclipse. So this gives the one perfect and absolute date of the this copper plate, and this can only be dated 9th May 53 BC. Now, what you have to do, you have to add 530 years to 53 BC. So that is 583 BC. This is how I have established the exact epoch of the ancient Shaka Era. And this is the reason why Varahamihira, who was in the court of Vikramaditya 1st century BC, and he is referring to 427. What you have to do, you have to calculate 427 years starting from 583 BCE. That comes around 156 or 157 BCE. That perfectly matches because he is taking an epoch, and he was born somewhere 146 BC, and he died in the 509 Shaka, and 509 Shaka is around 72 74 BC. And Vikramaditya ascended the throne somewhere in the 82 BC, because according to Bhavishya Purana, Vikramaditya was born in somewhere 3000 the year 3000 in Kali Yuga calendar. So if you calculate 3101 and you subtract 3000 years, it is 101 BC. So Vikramaditya was born somewhere 100 BC, and he became king of Ujjain when he was 18 years or 19 years old. And at that time, Varahamihira was in his court for 8 years or 10 years. So this is the reason why Kalidasa refers to Varahamihira as his senior contemporary. And Kalidasa was actually same age group, was in the same age group of Vikramaditya. And he refers to 445 Shaka for the Ayanamsha calculations. And if you calculate 445 starting from 583 BCE, so that year comes 138 BC. So this is how the Kalidasa and Varahamihira's contemporaneity with the Vikramaditya can be easily established, as well as the references of Shaka Era referred to by these two scholars can also be established. And the Jyotirvidabharanam gives a date of actually Kalidasa wrote in Kali 3068, and that is that the date is 34 or 33 BC. So we can explain every literary evidence if we differentiate between old Shaka Era and the later Shaka Era. So now how this 78 AD epoch was established. Actually, the Indian astronomers wanted a perfect epoch for the astronomical calculations. So what they need only a perfect conjunction of Sun, Moon, and Jupiter on the first day of the calendar. And Indian Surya Siddhanta calendar began on Chaitra Shukla Pratipada, the lunar day 1 of Chaitra month. So the 1st April 78 AD was actually the first day of the Chaitra month, and Sun, Moon, and Jupiter were in conjunction very close to the vernal equinox. So now this epoch became very perfect epoch for calculation, various astronomical calculation and everything. So that's why what they did, the Indian astronomers wanted a perfect conjunction of Sun, Moon, and Jupiter on the first day of the calendar. So they got this epoch in 78 AD. Then they started initially referring to it as the Shakanta, Shakandrapasyanta. But in a later period, we started referring to this epoch as the Shakavarsha. So now what happened, the ancient Shaka Era and the later Shaka Era both had the same name. Due to that, we have gradually forgotten the ancient epoch of Shaka Era. So this is the difference between these two different epochs. If we follow these two Shaka epochs, we can perfectly establish the entire chronology given in our literature. Now let us find out the epigraphic evidence. So actually there are numerous epigraphs or the inscriptions have been rejected as forgeries or scribble errors by the colonial rulers. Like the Kurtakoti copper plate itself, what I have just shown, that refers to the total solar eclipse. The Western scholars have rejected that as a forgery because they could not establish the occurrence of total solar eclipse in the 7th century AD, because they did Chalukyas in the 7th century AD. Now you have to understand, when I'm saying that Kurtakoti copper plate has to be dated in 9th May 53 BC, it means we have to shift uh, the dynasty, Chalukya dynasty, from 7th century to 1st century BC. We have to date them 660 years backwards, because this is the chronological error. Because there are many other copper plates. I will because what the Western scholars said it, they just followed a methodology called selective acceptance and selective rejection. They just followed one particular chronological framework. If any epigraphic evidence that is in line with the chronological framework in which they believe, then they accepted that as an evidence. If any epigraphic evidence that went contrary to their chronological framework, they rejected that as a forgery. But what I have established based on I have studied more than 12,000 inscriptions which are dated in Shaka Era, probably some 10 to 12,000 inscriptions. There is not a single inscription is forgery if you follow these two different Shaka epochs. The problem is, one, you are actually you are mixing up two epochs. Due to that false theory, various other evidences, literary evidences as well as epigraphic evidence, both are going contrary to your methodology. So you have no other option. You have to selectively accept the literary evidences. You have to selectively accept the epigraphic evidence. So I'm challenging that childish methodology. There is no way you can accept or reject as per your convenience. You have to establish why you are rejecting a particular. You have to give reasons why you have to reject. Just calling them as a forgery will not. It's not actually the a proper methodology of academic research. So I'll just present one inscription. This is the inscription is dated in 2027. If Shaka epoch commenced in 78 AD only, then how one inscription is dating Shaka 2027 means it is referring to future days 2105, means almost 84 years in future. How this is possible? So what the epigraphists or modern historians do, they just meddle with this dating. They convert 2 into 1 and say it is actually 1017, not 2027. There is a scribble error. But if you just see in the box on your right side, the Kannada numerals are written 1 and 2. The both are totally differently written. There, it is impossible to have any scribble error between these two. And even 1017, you can't establish the king and the various details given in this inscription. So actually, the king in 15th century, he was referring to the ancient Shaka epoch. So he was there 2027. If you calculate these 2027 years starting from 583 BC, so this inscription was actually written in 1443 or 1444 AD. In the 15th century, this Shaka was. And even we established the Ananda Samvatsara, various other evidences also. But if you accept only one epoch of Shaka Era, that is only 78 AD, then you have no other option to reject it as a forgery, or you have to actually do more forgery, or you have to do fraud to change the dates to accept this inscription and take back it to somewhere 11th century. So that's not the way to. And there is another inscription. This is actually related to Vijayanagara king. And this inscription is unambiguously referring to 1975 Shaka. So what you have to do, if it is only one Shaka that commenced in 78 AD, you have to add 78 years to 1975. Then it becomes 2053, almost 32 years even in the future. Now, what they do, they again do some forgery and change the date 1975 to some other date in the backwards. But that is not the way. You can't change epigraphic dates because those can't be edited. Those are actually original documents. And he is referring to 1975, a Vijayanagara king, means this king is yet to be born. So there is something is in wrong in our approach. This inscription is referring to an ancient Shaka epoch, not the epoch of 78 AD. And these are hard evidences, cannot be refuted. But since our so-called Indian historical research established the colonial era, had never bothered about perfectness because they were not following any science. They are just following one particular narrative. So this is the reason why academia in last 200 years could not see, because they have never been taught to do the research. They have been just taught to follow the what has been written in your textbooks. So everybody is following that one. So it means the blind men led by blind men. So that is being happening in the modern academia. This is another inscription of Hoysala king. He is referring to a Shaka epoch, Shaka Era 1919. If you had 78 years, 1997, hardly 25 years before. But 25 years before, there was no Hoysala king in Karnataka. Only Devagowda was ruling the Karnataka. Then I don't know who wrote this inscription. And even that, so naturally, these inscriptions have to be dated much, much earlier. So we have to accept that there was an ancient epoch of Shaka Era existed. And this is and what I have presented, three are irrefutable epigraphic evidences. Then let us follow the what the Western scholars did. They rejected numerous Chalukya inscriptions. Like there is a one grant, Pimpalner grant, and it is dated in 310. And if you add 78 years, 388 AD, in the almost in the 4th century, end of the 4th century. And this copper plate is, in a way, we can say it is the earliest grant, if we accept only one Shaka. But the problem is, this copper plate is written in Nagari script, Devanagari. Devanagari evolved little later than the script used by the Pulakeshin. During the time of early Chalukyas, they used some southern script. Now the problem is that how early, even because all early Chalukyas use southern script, but this copper plate, which is referring to much ancient date, but written in a later script. So that's why what they did, it is a forgery. Somebody wrote this somewhere 11th, 12th century, but he claimed some ancient date. So there should be something they have to establish. Why anybody will write it? What is the purpose? What he has achieved? Nothing. So actually, this particular copper plate is referring to Shakanta, the 70-80 epoch, and it is 4th century. All inscriptions of the early Chalukyas have to be dated in 1st century or 1st century BC or 1st century AD. That's all. Your problem is solved because the ancient Shaka and the later Shaka, these two existed. That's why this, and moreover, this Pimpalner grant is referring to a solar eclipse, and that is and the occurrence of solar eclipse can be established 18th August 388. So this copper plate is not a forgery if you accept what are the hard evidences I have presented that there was an ancient Shaka existed. So this copper plate is perfectly authentic. It's not anything forgery. Actually, nowhere in the world any forgery. Nobody or no civilization, no society has ever forged inscriptions. There was no motivation, nothing on what there is no evidence also. It's only in our chronological problem there are numerous errors, so we could not establish certain facts or certain we could not explain certain evidences. So what we are doing, we are conveniently rejecting some data. This is called a kind of a childish methodology in the academic research. So, and there are another 6 inscriptions of Vinayaditya. These are the 6 inscriptions dated in 516, 520, almost 4 inscriptions dated in 520, and one in 516. Now the problem is there was no Vinayaditya in the genealogy of Chalukyas even before Pulacation. But these copper plates indicate that there one Vinayaditya existed even before Pulacation. If so, then these inscriptions have to be written in a southern script. But these all 6 inscriptions have been written in Nagari script. Now, the epigraphists or the modern historians had no answer to these inscriptions. They rejected all 6 as the forgeries. But actually, if you differentiate between two shakas based on the evidences what I have presented, then all 6 inscriptions are very authentic. Even the some of these inscriptions refer to solar eclipses, and we can even perfectly establish the date of those solar eclipses mentioned in these inscriptions. That's why every inscription, every copper plate found in India are very much authentic. You have to only establish 2 different epochs of Shaka Era, what I have established based on the actually an exact epoch I have established based on the copper plate of one Chalukya king, that is the Kurtakoti copper plates. Now, very recent, hardly 6 or 7 years before, there is a one Pranaveshwara temple in Talagunda in Karnataka. The archaeologists want 2 copper plates actually together, and one copper plate, I'll just show you. One copper plate was issued during the time of Kalachuri Sangama, and this copper plate is dated in Shaka 1102. There is another copper plate is actually related to the Chalukya king Vinayaditya, and it is referring to Shaka 520. Now, the difference between these two is more than 600 years. But both copper plates have been written in Devanagari script, and surprisingly, the copper plate of Vinayaditya is referring to the same boundaries of a particular land, and same boundaries have been also mentioned in the copper plate of the Kalachuri king Sangama. What the confused modern historians or epigraphists, they accepted this Sangama copper plate as an authentic, but they rejected this copper plate as a forgery. Why? Because they had no answer. How can you explain chronologically? Because there is only one Shaka Era 78. You can't put this copper plate somewhere in the 6th century. So that's why they rejected this as a forgery. But actually, what if you can easily comprehend the dates of these 2 copper plates, if you accept 2 different epochs of Shaka Era, this Kalachuri king is referring to one Shaka epoch, that is 583 BCE, and if you calculate 1102, it is almost 520, 530 AD. If you and this copper plate of Vinayaditya has to be dated in 598 AD. And moreover, this copper plate is referring to a solar eclipse that occurred on Chaitra Amavasya, and that copper plate perfectly correspond to 30th April 599 AD. So This it is totally absurd to say that this copper plate is forged. And this is the copper plate of Kalachuri Sangama. And I have actually even Vinayaditya, copper plate 599 AD. The Tasya Purva Disho Bhage Tataka Puranama Grame. So this actually this text is governing the boundaries of the particular land, which was actually donated by the king to a family of learned people. So actually, there are cross references in both the inscriptions. So you can't reject one as a forgery. Either you have to reject both as a forgery or both are authentic. It is impossible to say that one copper plate is authentic, other one is forgery. That is actually illogical. But that illogical decisions are that kind of illogical conclusions are also part of our modern research. So why? Because we have no idea how to explain both copper plates in the same chronology. Why? Because we have no knowledge of any ancient Shaka epoch. But if we try to reconcile the literary evidences and the epigraphic evidences, then we can easily see that there was an ancient epoch that got mixed up with the later epoch, and that led to a chronological error of 660 years. There is another grant called Valabhi grant of Dharasenadeva, and this grant was issued in Shaka 400. And this copper plate was also written in Nagari script. So this is another problem. So what the historians have done, they just rejected it because this Dharasenadeva has to be dated before the Valabhi kings who date their copper plates in Gupta Samvat. Now, the modern historians say Gupta Samvat commenced in somewhere 320 AD. Then the first copper plate of Valabhi king can only be dated after 500 AD. But this Valabhi grant of Dharasenadeva has to be dated somewhere 478 AD. And moreover, this is written in Nagari script. It has to be dated much later than the copper plates of the Maitraka dynasty. So that's why historians have rejected it. But actually, if we establish the chronology based on the two different epochs, then Dharasenadeva copper plate, this Valabhi grant actually, it is dated in Shakanta 400, so it means 478 AD. Whereas the Gupta Samvat, if we consider the Shaka Era in 583 BC, then Gupta era commenced in 335 BC, not 319 or 320 AD. So now the epoch of Gupta era also has to be, we have to date in the 4th century BC, not in the 4th century AD, because there is a chronological error of 606 years in dating of Indian eras due to the error in the both Shaka epochs. So the Valabhi grants are dated in 2nd century BC to 1st century AD. So perfectly all copper plates fall in line in the chronological framework. So there is no need to reject this copper plates as a forgery. Actually, Dharasenadeva, a descendant of the early Valabhi kings, and he was ruling in Valabhi around 478 AD. So there is another grant of Dhiniki grant Jayadeva, and has to be dated 737 AD. So historians have rejected, but stating that it is very difficult to date any Valabhi kings in the 8th century AD. So this is how the numerous inscriptions. This is another grant of Ammanika grant of Shanti Verman. Shanti Verman was a Kadamba king and son of Shiva Varman, and this grant is dated in Shaka 238 year, Shaka era. Now, if we add 78 years to 238, it would be around 310 or 320 AD. But at that time, no Kadamba king existed as per the chronology given in the modern textbooks. So what they did, they rejected it as a forgery. But actually, this grant was dated in ancient epoch of Shaka era, 583 BC. If you subtract 232 years, then from 583 BC, this grant can be dated 352 to around 350 BC. And the year of 352, 351, the seventh regnal year of the Shanti Verman. So Shanti Verman was ascended the throne somewhere 558 or 559 BC. So this is how we can establish the absolute chronology of Kadamba kings. So all Kadamba kings, actually they established the dynasty that Mayura Sharman, the founder of the Kadamba dynasty, flourished in the 5th century BC, not the way modern historians teach us somewhere 4th century or 5th century AD. So these are the chronological problems got cropped in our chronological framework due to considering the only one Shaka Era that commenced in 78 AD. And there is another copper plate, that Mudyanuru grant of Bana and Malladeva. And this is how these, again, the same problem, the way the historians, they have to reject selectively certain copper plates because they always go contrary to the chronological framework established during the colonial era. The numerous, even all inscriptions. Now let us take the copper plates of Vijayanagara Empire, because the entire modern academia believes that Vijayanagara was established only in the middle of the 14th century AD. If so, but what I have established, there were the two different epochs. Then the establishment of the Vijayanagara Empire has means the date has to be pushed back to 660 years also. So then, actually, in fact, Vijayanagara established in the middle of the 7th century AD, not in the 14th century. I'll just explain. So there are I have found almost 30 inscriptions, and these inscriptions refer to Vijayanagara kings and dated before 1336, means the 14th century. How that is possible? If you just glance through these 10 inscriptions, the one copper plate is dated Shaka 1004. If you add 78 years, then 1082. Then how in the 11th century, a book of Bhupati Raya, a king of Vijayanagara kingdom, was ruling in Karnataka. So the historians, they have very easy methodology. They just rejected it as a forgery. So that's all. What any evidence is contrary, you can easily get rid of it just stating that it's a forgery. Because you are the ruler, nobody will question you. So the colonial historians, since they were the rulers, they set this standard, and we are simply following this kind of a foolish methodology even today. We are also selectively rejecting and selectively accepting the way Britishers did. So I think the so-called Indian Council of Historical Research are just, I don't know what, I don't want to use the word. It's not a research. They are just following what the certain so-called standards established by the colonial historians. And I can't go through each way, but you can easily glance through it. Numerous inscriptions have been dated much before the 14th century, and all these inscriptions refer to Vijayanagara kings. So it is easy. Either you simply distort the dates to push forward the dates and then accept them as an authentic, or reject them as forgery. So what modern historians have done, they either edited some dates so that they can brought forward the dates of these copper plates to 14th, 15th century, or they rejected them as a forgery. So very convenient methodology. Apart from that, there are another 42 Vijayanagara inscriptions. Actually, these inscriptions go contrary to the existing chronology. Why? Because I'll just show you few instances. One Kuchipudi copper plate, it is actually is referring to King Achyuta Deva Raya, and this copper plate is dated 1270 Shaka Era, means 1348 AD. But at that time, Harihara was ruling over the Vijayanagara kingdom. How a king Achyutaraya was existing. Actually, no Achyuta Devaraya ever existed before 16th century as per the modern textbooks. But this copper plate is saying that there was a king Achyuta Devaraya in the middle of the 14th century, almost at the same time of the Harihara. So there are almost 42. So I will not go through the details because it's huge data. So inconsistent, but still they managed it based on the selective acceptance and selective rejection. So the childish methodology, they followed it. And I'll give you one literary evidence why Vijayanagara, the history of Vijayanagara and the chronology of Vijayanagara also has to be pushed back to 660 year. Firishta, he was the very a Muslim scholar, and he wrote the history of all Muslim rulers. And he says that in a particular, actually, he was referring to the ancestors of one Krishna Raya, was ruling somewhere 1360 in the 14th century. And he says that they possessed a kingdom of 700 years. It means a king, a Vijayanagara king, who was ruling in the 14th century, had a legacy of 700 years already. So there is a clear evidence for the chronological error in the Vijayanagara king empire also. And these things also, as well as even Robert Sewell, he also Firishta declares that they had existed a ruling family for 700 years prior to the year 1350. But they just rejected that Firishta is not reliable. It means any ancient historian or modern historian or future historian, if he do not comply with the so-called narratives have been established, then those are not reliable. So even my research is also not reliable because that goes contrary to the facts or the so-called history written in the modern textbooks. And these are certain literary evidences, what I want to say, that Prataparudra Charita written by Ekamranatha, he gives one perfect chronology of the Kakatiya kings. And these Kakatiya, and he is referring to Vijayanagara kingdom somewhere 7th and 8th century AD. So what the historian, they just say that this Prataparudra Charita is not reliable. But if you accept two different epochs, then we can easily explain the chronology given in Prataparudra Charita also. So this is also another copper plate they have rejected. Actually, one Ganga king Arkeshwara was ruling in the 12th century, because this copper plate is dated in Kali Yuga 4248 years. That comes around 1145. But at that time, one Anantavarman Chodaganga was ruling over Orissa, and in the same district, that Ganjam district. How two different kings are ruling in the same district and issuing copper plates stating that they are the sovereign rulers of that particular region. And Anantavarman Chodaganga was a very powerful king of Orissa. It is impossible that any other king can survive within his own district. So that's why actually the Anantavarman Chodaganga was actually in 5th century, not in the 12th century, if you correct that Shaka Era, that 660 year. And the one king Arkeshwara was ruling in the 12th century. This is the actually the chronological solution. I actually established this fact that there were actually two different epochs. One Shaka epoch that existed in the 6th century BC, and that was commenced in 583 BC based on the epigraphic evidence. And the one Shakanta era, actually this epoch was established by the Indian astronomers for better and accurate astronomical and calendrical calculations. So this is the solution to these are all chronological problems, and this selective acceptance, the way we are dealing with when you are dealing with the data, you have to explain it for every rejection of the data. If your model is not perfect, then there is a requirement to change the model. So I am actually requesting the historians to reconsider based on the fact presented by me that there's so much of epigraphic evidence and as well as literary evidence suggests that there was an ancient epoch of Shaka Era existed. If you accept it, then you can solve all chronological problems in Indian history. Not only that, even in the world history also. So this is the fact what I have established based on the epigraphic evidence, and based on that we can solve the first problem of the chronology, that is the error of 660. So this is how we have to follow. So Aditya ji, I'll just complete my the presentation here, because I wanted to restrict today a very technical presentation. How we lost the chronology of 660 year due to mixing up of two different epochs.
Oh, very, very convincing presentation, Vedveer as usual. And the biggest thing which comes out to my mind is that, and you rightly said it, that it is the duty of the Indian historical, the Council of History Research, to present all sides of the story. And the
Yes,
biggest problem is syncretism. Like they want
yes,
to synchronize their dates with the Abrahamic calendar dates.
yes,
Now, a political question here is, why will any Abrahamic calendar try to synchronize with the Indian calendar
yes,
when they are trying to prove the dates of Jesus even till date? And some of
yes,
them are even doubting whether Jesus ever existed. Now, now, why will they do it? Because if they do it, then everything that they've done so far goes to the trash. And they started doing it in 17th century. Just 400 years they've been doing it. And in 400 years, they have captured every single institution. Now, when I talk to an American student or a Korean student, they will all say, one life. We have only one life. This is all like it was the first church propaganda, papal bull, Council of Nicaea in
yes,
600 AD, 600 CE, and that's
yes,
where all these craziness has come out.
yes,
Now, if they are crazy, why should we be crazy? No, we are followers of the eternal structure. Ramayana and Mahabharata so old. You have proved it so many times in our talks also,
yes, yes, yes.
and so many other forums.
Actually, what is happening in modern academia? They are not actually not teaching the students the model of research adopted by the historians. What actually they are failing to explain certain facts. So you must include in your textbook that this is the model we have followed. This only explains out of 100 pieces of evidences, it only explains some 40, 50, 60. There are 40 we are not able to explain it. So there is a need for a further research, but they never present, like they just present one date that this is the only date you have to follow it, like a gospel of I don't know whose gospel it is. So you follow that, that's all. There is no need to rethink. Then if you are not thinking the date line at all, then the history, what research you can do it?
No, it's a
Because
goat spell.
history is
Yes,
chronology based research. The chronology only, if there are errors in the chronology, then your history is wrong.
that's right.
So actually, the modern academia is not promoting research. Actually, they are blocking the research.
That's right. That's right. No, that's true. And people, the Indians feel very proud to question everything logical, and even
Yes,
Americans. Now, first of all, let me tell you, the American academic culture is, if you ask a question, whether it's a church or a mosque or any other place you go, you are kicked out straight.
yes,
Now, the same culture is in the universities also. If any
yes,
student asks these kind of questions, he's kicked out of the program. Try
yes,
anyone. Like most of the Indians complain about free speech in India. Try that in American university or any American forum. You'll be kicked
yes,
out of the conference. You'll be kicked out of the program. You'll be kicked out of the. So there's no questioning allowed because it's a propaganda. It's like I am the judge, the victim, the juror, and everything else combined. So anyone else, no question. If anyone asks a question, he is a
yes.
conspiracy theorist.
And one more interesting fact of my research, I'll tell you, Aditya. This 660 years in Indian calendar, because the two Shaka epochs, led to a chronological error of 600 in Indian chronology. But the same similar chronological error exists in the Western chronology also. Why? Because we are all following, or actually today is 2021. This is the current year. So we have been taught that first AD is the Jesus birth. So that's why you have a before Christ or after Christ or whatever you want to do it, Anno Domini. But there is a before Christ means before first AD, there Christ never existed. Okay. So that first AD, how this first AD has been established, do you have any historical evidence?
No.
I'm not questioning the historicity of a one particular person. I'm just asking the date. If a date is historical, it must have supported by some evidence. So what they do, they say that no, the Augustus lived for actually he started reigning 44 years before Jesus. So they do give some circular reasoning. But what I found it, the East Church, because Byzantine Empire, because Western Church became weak and then Byzantine Empire took over the reigns. Thereafter, they lost to the Turkey lost to Muslims. So the Byzantine Empire, Eastern Church, the East Church bishops, they used to follow Indian calendar for the Easter calculation. And their dates for this are everything was linked to the Shaka. Now, Shaka calendar of India was actually brought forward because they got mixed up. The same problem carried forward to them. So, in a way, what I am saying is that even Jesus existed or a historic person, he has to be dated 660 BC, not in first AD. Okay. This is the error in the Western chronology. This is the reason why Western academia is repeatedly failing to give the chronology of the second millennium BC. Because second millennium, that Hammurabi dynasty, as well as the even Egyptian chronology, they have till date they failed. Even they could not even establish the dates of the Venus tablets. So what they come up? They come up with some long chronology, short chronology, middle chronology, ultra short chronology. I don't know. One poor Hammurabi has the 4 or 5 different date of birth, and they say that they follow the chronology. Then say when we insist on absolute chronology, they say it's not required any absolute dating in the ancient period. We can manage with the relative chronology. So these are not the scientific ways of thinking. If an individual existed, then he can have a one particular date. Because we have the dates. If there is no prehistoric period, then you can say that okay, some band you can say that 1,000 years, 2,000 years, based on the whatever the carbon dated. Here, actual chronology, even entire biblical references are available, literary and even epigraphic evidence that Venus tablet and numerous the cuneiform tablets, they can be perfectly dated. But since you are following a wrong methodology or a wrong date of the Jesus Christ, you have gone wrong, and not only gone wrong. What the Western Academy did, they established first AD as the sheet anchor of entire world chronology. Due to that, all traditional chronologies have gone wrong. If we want to establish the true chronology, so first we have to remove this first AD as the sheet anchor status. It does not deserve to be sheet anchor status. We have to establish new sheet anchors for the Western chronology, like the epoch of Olympiad era, the epoch of Nabonassar era, or even the epoch of the Rome city's date of establishment, when that city was. So from there we have to go backwards or should come forward instead of following blindly from the first study, because there is not a single research paper ever exists. पूरा network सर्च कर लीजिए, but it's own it there is no research paper exist
So now
on
we have
first
it.
AD why it is historical. They just since our era they have a one blind belief it is our era.
No, the entire Abrahamic faith is based on blind faith. I mean, the questioning is definitely not allowed. But we are not blind faith. You know, Krishna says, "Evam buddhe param buddhva samsabhyatmanam atmana." He says we have
But
to use our.
Aditya Jay, one if you can any the American universities are interested, then we can present these things how Western chronology is also wrong. because the problem is we have to reconcile Indian chronology with the Alexander and the Indo-Greek kings. So
No,
that is the major challenge.
we'll organize a
That
debate.
challenge can only be solved if we can correct the Western chronology also.
We'll shortly organize a debate. We have been, COVID-19 has taken away all our plans. So shortly the debate
Yes.
will be there. So we'll do
Yes.
that. Many people are in touch with me. And in
Yes.
fact, many of the professors watch our shows. So I would like to
Okay.
invite them to also. So if you're watching it, you are very much invited. We will start that series shortly. On yoga, we already started. So we'll start on this also. But thank you
Okay.
so much, Vedveer. As usual, for me, this is an entertainment. I love it because
Okay.
everyone has a different type of entertainment standards. For me, I love. This is what I love, and learned a lot. At the same time, it just proves that how the the methodology of not unquestionable. Like when people say I'm not questionable, then that defeats the Sanatan Dharma concept. And because Sanatan Dharma is all about buddhi, vivek, and which is very important for us. And so, thank you all very much. And also, I always say to the students and everyone else that the knowledge should make you vinamra or humble, not arrogant, because arrogance is not the symbol of an intelligent mind. So
Yes.
keep that in mind, and thank you all very much. Do watch the show, send it out to your friends, and do watch it on YouTube for a wider audience. Thank you, Vedveer ji. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaste.